I have no idea what Bionic nylon is, but that's what these bristles are made out of. In today's video, I'm giving away all these goodies and testing out Meeden's 9 set of watercolor round brushes. Let's see how they compare to my favorite round brush, the Silver Black Velvet. I started out by just removing that protective coating that the brushes had, and that was really easy to do. And I'm taking this nice size 9 brush to create a nice wash of just plain water. And that is just, it's really soft. I just get the feeling like this is a fun brush to hold. So this was fun. The feeling of the brush in your hands is really nice. And it's fun to work with a really big wash brush like this. I'm going to go ahead and use my mix of purple. It's one of my favorite purple mixes. It's Opera Pink plus Lunar Black. And it's just a really fun, warm, granular purple. So I'm going to put that in these sections so we can test out these two techniques with a nice wash of pigment here. And it definitely holds a lot of water. It's a lot of water, and it is very responsive in that I squish the bristles and it comes right back to the point. It's very responsive. And that was part of the description, is that it's a responsive brush. The material is very responsive and it also has a great water capacity, and I would definitely agree with both of those sentiments. I'm just trying to get a lot of pigment in this wash so that these techniques have their best opportunity to shine. I'm going to babysit that so that we can test those techniques with the smaller brushes and our Silver Black Velvet brush. I'm going to move on to trying to do this first layer for the pigmented edges. I'm going to get my mix of orange, so Opera Pink and Azo Yellow, and I'm going to use my grainer brush. So typically when I do pigmented edges, oftentimes I will do it with a grainer brush as a technique for painting fur. So I'm going to try to get some nice furry edges here, and we'll be able to test this technique right away before this pigment dries. So a nice heavy mix of pigment in here with my grainer brush. And then I'll come in, I'm going to use the size 3. And when I try to get pigmented edges, basically I try to scrub the pigment off in the middle of the shape, and then I'll try to drop in water. So I'm kind of lifting the pigment with the brush and then dropping in water. Sometimes I'll have to lift some of that extra pigment off, and then I'll drop in water here. So I would say it's doing what I want it to do for a round brush. And this isn't the most technical application of a brush, I would say. I can do the same thing, I'm sure, with my Silver Black Velvet brush. Dropping in water, scrubbing. I would say that it holds more water than my Silver Black Velvet brush. I don't really need to re-dip into the water with the Meeden brush as much as I would need to here with this one. And then dropping in water to move that pigment aside to the edges. I had to pick up more water when using this brush, but I also did use the bigger size of the Meeden brush for that test. Let's test thick and thin lines, and I'm just going to do this with black. So typically when I do visible brush strokes, I will often use black. So I'm just going to go ahead and scoop up some of my neutral tint, and it's really, it's just easy. The water stays in there. It picks up the pigment from my palette. Let's see how it does if I'm trying to do really thin lines and then variegated lines. That's awesome because you want to be able to do a lot, like a large line, without having to go back for more pigment. So that was very well. So that was the size 3. Here's the size 2. So I would feel very confident using this brush to paint around eyes. Wow, that's a really, really thin line. That's absolutely gorgeous. So let's go ahead and use my go-to brush for thick and thin lines, the Silver Black Velvet, and see if I can achieve that with this one. Now, my Silver Black Velvet brush is a little bit older, so it's not quite as fair as testing it against a brand new one, but I would say it's extremely comparable. But honestly, I'm very excited to use these Meeden brushes for thin lines because, I mean, we were able to achieve the super thin line without it skipping. Let's go ahead and try color resist. And I know quinacridone gold is a great color for color resist. So I'm going to pick up a nice heavy mix of gold, and it's really just thirsty for that pigment. Really, really fun. So let's see if we're at a good stage. We are. Look at how it's moving that pigment around. That was beautiful. That was so pretty. So let's test our Silver Black Velvet brush with that. And it's doing, I would say, the same. Very beautiful. And let's test water resist with our bigger brush. We have the size 3. So I'm going to try to get a good amount of water. So this technique is a little bit more dependent on the amount of water you have in your brush too, in terms of precision. So I'm going to give myself a little bit of grace here in terms of if this is kind of the result I'm looking for. And you can see the water resist technique too turns a little bit black, and that's because of our lunar black in that purple mix. So that's no fault of the brush. That's just the properties of the paint that we're using. And it became kind of fun to test splatter too for water resist. This holds a lot of water. I think I'm catching some of it in the binding here. But it definitely holds a lot of water. It had a little bit of a accident right there. So that's something I would have to maybe get used to, is not dipping my brush maybe all the way into my well, because then I catch it on the binding and get a little too much water. So 2 things that I would just be aware of if you are going to invest in a set of these brushes is that yes, they hold a lot of water. So give yourself a little bit of time to get used to that if you're not used to that in your brushes that you're using right now. And then 2, especially with the larger size brushes, because they hold so much water and pigment, when you're done working with it, you're going to have a lot of pigment in this brush. So I would take time to swipe it back into my palette and save that for your next painting instead of just washing it all down the drain. But I think it's a huge advantage being able to hold a lot of color and a lot of water in your bristles without having to go back into your palette or back into your water cup. Okay, I'm more excited than I anticipated I was going to be with this set of brushes. I didn't want to come into it with any kind of expectations. I've never used Meeden brushes before. I'm honestly kind of blown away. If you are loving what you're learning in this video and wish that I offered more, I do. I would love to have you join us in our Studio Family membership right here on YouTube. You can click the join button and get access to 2 exclusive member-only paint-alongs every single week. Members also get to help me choose what I paint each month, get access to monthly supply giveaways, and enjoy community in our private Facebook group. I'd love to have you join us. Here's a little bit more information about the actual brushes themselves. Meeden sent me the full 9-piece set of brushes, but I think you can order them separately or as a set of 4. Honestly, the first thing I noticed when I opened the brushes, unfortunately, they had somewhat of a plasticky smell, and I'm very sensitive to smells, so I was kind of nervous. So then I took them out of the casings. They call them the shatterproof travel cases, so that's handy that those are there. But the brushes themselves have absolutely no smell. So I'm sure that that smell was from the packaging. So you could get rid of that packaging if it's bothering you and just keep the brushes. But it is kind of nice to have that packaging for travel. Now, in my free supply list that you can get at paint333.com, I do have a page about brushes where I talk about material, shape, and handle. Watercolor brushes, you're kind of looking for a shorter handle because you're working a little bit more up close. It's a bonus if you can have a chiseled edge on the end of your handle for scraping. Unfortunately, none of the brushes I regularly use have that. For some reason, it's just not a very common thing that I found on watercolor brushes, which I think is kind of silly because it's so nice to have a built-in scraping tool on the end of your handle. These Meeden brushes don't have that. But again, like I said, all the brushes that I regularly use don't have that either. So that's not a make or breaker. It's just nice to have. Diving a little bit more into the handle of the brush. These are beechwood, 100% wood handles, and they said on the website that they're weighted. And you can kind of feel that. They're kind of a little bit hefty in a really good way. And the other thing I noticed when I opened them too is that they're soft. They just have this soft feeling on them that I really appreciated. They also took extra attention to the actual width of the handle so that it's easier to grip. You know how kindergartners and kids like the fat crayons and the fat pencils, just because it's easier to hold and work with? The same thing is applying to these brushes. The shape is just a round brush, so they're all round brushes. That term round has always gotten me a little uneasy because they really come to a really nice fine point. They are not round at the top. They come to a really nice fine point, and they excelled in creating fine lines. When I started painting watercolor, I thought the only way you could create a fine line was with a rigger brush. And I was always really frustrated with rigger brushes because they are it's such a thin amount of bristles. It doesn't hold any water or paint. So you can create a fine line, but it has to be very short before you have to go back in and get more paint and water. And then I found round brushes like the Silver Black Velvet brush that has wider bristles at the bottom so that you can actually hold some water and paint and create a longer fine line before having to refill with paint and water. And these Meeden brushes are absolutely gorgeous. They hold so much water and paint. So we talked about the handle, we talked about the shape. I just want to talk about the actual composition of the bristles. On the box it says water collected new tech, which I thought was wonderfully vague. I have like no idea what that means. It sounds really cool though. So I looked on their website and it is synthetic squirrel. It's called Bionic Nylon, but it's supposed to hold a lot of water and be really responsive. And I found both of those things to be true during the testing. And one thing I saw repeatedly on the website is that there's no shedding. And they said it on the package too, no shedding. Obviously, these are brand new brushes, so I can't tell you if they will still not shed 10 years from now. They did not shed in the test. I don't expect that they will. If you do have brushes that shed, you likely have very, very cheap brushes. Honestly, my decades old round brushes that are super cheap don't shed. So if you are having problems with shedding, you should invest in different brushes. You should not be dealing with shedding with your brushes. And the other brush type that I love and use often, the Princeton Artiste series with the short blue handles, have never shed either. And I love how these brushes perform, and I love their price point, and I love how many different sizes and shapes they come in. It handled the techniques that I would regularly use for round brushes very well. And I mentioned this when I first started painting, and especially if you paint washes often, this was just fun. It's just fun to hold. It like that weighted feeling, and then how soft the texture of the handle is. It's just a fun brush to paint with. I wish I could come back and tell you in 5 years what I still think of them, because often I'll get excited or even not excited. When I first tried Lunar Black from Daniel Smith, I didn't like it at all. I thought it was gummy and it spread too much. And now it is one of my absolute favorite colors. So I want to be cautious about saying this is a 10 out of 10 brush set before having the opportunity to use them regularly in my practice and for a long time. But initially, my initial thoughts are yes, 10 out of 10. Now that we've reviewed that really fun pack of brushes, here it is, the behemoth, the Meeden Christmas box. Oh! Now, in full transparency, I've already dove into this box. I was too excited. And it would have taken me forever to have unboxed this in front of the camera because inside are 24 individually packaged goodies. I tell you, my daughter and I had the funnest time looking through all this stuff. We already took out some of the really fun things. They had hairpins that looked like paint tubes. There was a mini little sketchbook and a mini keychain and a mini brush so you can take your watercolor with you wherever you go. And I gave that to my daughter right away. Goodies, canvas, brushes. Oh my gosh, look at flat brushes, paper samples, colored pencils. Because she was just so excited when we went through this. It was just like this whole fun mother-daughter experience when we got this and we opened it together. I will be giving away all of this to one random commenter on today's video. So drop a comment within the first 24 hours of this video's premiere for your chance to win. I will pick a random comment and then reply to that comment to let you know to send me your mailing address so I can send you all your goodies. We have quite a few things from the Christmas box, including this really cute canvas bag. And then we have the 2 brushes from the 9-pack of brushes, a size 5 and size 1. And then a printed copy of my Paint 333 supply list. So you can learn a little bit more about brushes and my paint and my paper and extra supplies that I love to use. It's just a really handy guide, and it's fun to have a printed copy of that. Special thank you to Meeden for giving me all these goodies to share with you today. I know a lot of people love their watercolor paper, and I have another video where I review their watercolor paper. Personally, it's not my favorite watercolor paper, but I'm pretty picky about watercolor paper. So it's not a paper that I regularly use. I did test it out and I share my thoughts in that video, but a lot of people really love it. So that's going to be fun for whoever wins it. So whether you win these goodies or not, you can get my Paint 333 supply list for free at paint333.com. And I wish you very happy painting, and I will see you in the next video.